The early morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Pine Valley Mall as Staff Sergeant James Cooper pulled his black Ford pickup into an empty spot. He sat there for a moment, his calloused hand still gripping the steering wheel, while his mother, Martha, gathered her purse. Even after 3 months back home, these civilian spaces still felt strange to him. "Jimmy, are you sure you're up for this?" Martha asked, noticing how her son's dark eyes scanned the surroundings. At 42, James still had the sharp, athletic build from his military days, though a few strands of gray had started appearing in his short black hair. "I'm fine, Mom," he replied with a gentle smile. "Just need to get used to shopping malls instead of forward operating bases." As they walked toward the entrance, James couldn't help but note the positions of every security camera, emergency exit, and potential choke point. 15 years in the Rangers had hardwired certain habits into his system. 3 tours in Afghanistan had taught him that situational awareness wasn't paranoia, it was survival. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, releasing a blast of cool air-conditioned breath. Inside, the mall was starting to wake up. Store employees were raising their shutters. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the food court, and early morning walkers were doing their laps around the gleaming corridors. "The doctor said I need to walk more," Martha explained, her silver hair neatly styled for their outing. "And since your father passed last year, I haven't been getting out much. It's good to have you home, Jimmy." James nodded, feeling a familiar pang of guilt. He'd missed his father's funeral because he'd been deployed. By the time the news had reached him in Kandahar, the burial was already over. That was part of why he finally decided to retire from active duty. Family needed him more than the military now. As they walked past a children's play area, a toddler's sudden scream made James instinctively reach for a weapon that wasn't there. He caught himself mid-motion, turning it into a casual stretch. Old habits died hard. The kid was just excited about the carousel, but for a split second, James had been back in Helmand Province. "Look, the shoe store is having a sale," Martha said, either not noticing her son's reaction or kindly choosing to ignore it. "My walking shoes are pretty worn out." James checked his watch. 9:15 a.m. The mall was still relatively empty, which helped keep his anxiety in check. Crowds sometimes triggered his hypervigilance, a souvenir from his combat days that his therapist said would take time to manage. They entered the shoe store, where a young sales clerk greeted them cheerfully. As Martha tried on different walking shoes, James positioned himself where he could see both the store entrance and his mother. It was automatic, like breathing. "What do you think of these?" Martha asked, modeling a pair of white New Balance sneakers. Before James could answer, a deep rumbling sound echoed through the mall, motorcycles in the parking lot. Through the store's entrance, he saw several bikes pull up near the main doors. The riders were wearing leather vests with some kind of gang insignia. James felt his pulse quicken slightly, but he kept his face neutral. "No need to worry, Mom." Besides, this wasn't Afghanistan or Iraq. This was Pine Valley Mall in suburban Minnesota. Still, he made a mental note of the bikers' numbers and appearance as they entered the building. "Those look comfortable, Mom," he said, turning his attention back to Martha. "How do they feel for walking?" "Oh, they're perfect. I'll take them," she beamed at the sales clerk. As the clerk rang up the purchase, James thought about how different his life was now. 3 months ago, he'd been leading combat patrols and training Afghan forces. Today, he was shoe shopping with his mother. The transition wasn't easy, but moments like this, simple, peaceful moments, reminded him why he'd made the right choice coming home. Little did James Cooper know that this ordinary morning at Pine Valley Mall was about to become anything but peaceful. His military training, instincts, and combat experience would soon be put to an unexpected test, not in some distant battlefield, but right here in his hometown shopping mall. The 5 bikers swaggered into Pine Valley Mall like they owned it. Their heavy boots echoed across the polished floor, drawing nervous glances from shoppers and store employees alike. The leader of the group, a massive man known as Beast, stood well over 6 feet tall with arms thick as tree trunks. His leather vest displayed the Street Kings patch, a notorious local gang known for causing trouble in the area. From inside the shoe store, James Cooper watched them carefully while pretending to be interested in a display of running shoes. His mother was still trying on different pairs, happily unaware of the changing atmosphere in the mall. "Hey, turn that music down," Beast bellowed at a teenage employee of a nearby music store. The young worker, hands shaking, quickly lowered the volume. The biker's voice carried the raspy edge of someone who'd smoked too many cigarettes for too many years. The group spread out near the center of the mall. Two of them, younger members with fresh tattoos on their necks, started revving their motorcycles' engines in the parking lot through remote starters, making the windows vibrate. An elderly couple hurriedly changed direction to avoid walking past them. "Look at these sheep," laughed Snake, Beast's right-hand man. He was shorter than his leader, but had a mean look in his eyes that spoke of genuine danger. A long scar ran from his left ear to his chin, giving him a permanent sneer, all scared of their own shadows. James noticed how the mall's single security guard, an overweight man in his 60s, conveniently found a reason to walk in the opposite direction. The bikers had clearly done this before. They knew no one would stop them. "Hey, sweetie," Beast called out to a young female store clerk, making her quickly retreat inside her shop. The other bikers laughed, their voices echoing off the mall's high ceiling. One of them, a skinny guy with a bandana, spat on the floor near a potted plant. Martha Cooper finally picked her shoes and walked to the register. James positioned himself where he could keep both his mother and the bikers in his line of sight. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, those instincts were telling him these men weren't just here to window shop. "I heard the cops gave you trouble last week, Beast," said one of the younger bikers, trying to sound tough. He had AKT tattooed across his knuckles, though the fresh ink suggested it was a recent addition. Beast's face darkened. "Those pigs tried to shut down our bar, said we were selling to minors." He kicked a trash can, sending it rolling across the floor. Nobody tells the street kings what to do. Nobody. James watched as mall employees hurriedly closed their security gates or retreated to back rooms. The few remaining shoppers were quickly heading for the exits. Only a group of teenage boys remained, watching from a safe distance with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Mom," James said quietly, "why don't we grab some coffee before heading home?" He wanted to get her somewhere secure, preferably near an exit. "That sounds lovely, Jimmy," Martha replied, still oblivious to the tension in the air. She was busy checking her new shoes in the shopping bag. As they stepped out of the shoe store, Snake noticed them. His eyes lingered on Martha's gold necklace, a wedding anniversary gift from James's late father. James saw the look and felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen that predatory gaze before, usually right before things went bad. "Look what we got here, boys," Snake called out, nudging Beast. "Some nice company for the morning." Beast turned his attention toward them, a nasty grin spreading across his face. Well, looks like our day just got more interesting." The other bikers formed a loose circle, not directly blocking James and Martha's path, but making it clear that passing through wouldn't be simple. The teenage boys who had been watching pulled out their phones, sensing something was about to happen. James gently guided his mother toward the food court, keeping himself between her and the bikers. His mind was already calculating distances, angles, and potential weapons if things went south. The weight of his phone in his pocket reminded him that help was just a call away, but in situations like this, help usually arrived too late. The morning had just taken a dark turn, and James Cooper knew that the next few minutes would determine how bad things might get. The food court at Pine Valley Mall was usually a peaceful place on weekday mornings. Today was different. James Cooper stood in line at the coffee shop, his body tense as he kept one eye on his mother, who had found a seat near the large decorative fountain. The 5 Street Kings bikers had spread out across the area, making other customers uncomfortable enough to leave. "What would you like to drink, Mom?" James called out, trying to keep his voice casual despite his growing concern. "Oh, just a small vanilla latte, dear," Martha replied, setting her shopping bag with her new shoes on the empty chair beside her. She was still happily unaware of the dangerous atmosphere developing around them. As James waited to place their order, he noticed Beast nudging Snake and pointing toward his mother. The other 3 bikers were blocking the main exit from the food court, while their leaders slowly made their way toward Martha. James was now 6th in line, too far to reach her quickly if something happened. "Hey there, Grandma," Beast said, pulling out a chair at Martha's table and sitting down uninvited. "That's a mighty fine necklace you're wearing." Snake stood behind Martha's chair, placing his hands on its back. Martha's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, thank you. My late husband gave it to me." "Late husband, huh?" Snake leaned down, his scarred face too close to Martha's. So you're all alone now? James stepped out of the coffee line immediately, but a group of high school students with their trays blocked his direct path. He began moving around them, his combat-trained mind already assessing the situation. 5 hostiles. 2 directly threatening his mother. 3 blocking the exit. Multiple civilians in the area. No visible weapons yet, but their loose clothing could conceal anything. I'm not alone, Martha said, her voice starting to shake. My son is. Your son? Beast laughed, reaching for the shopping bag on the chair. What's in here, Grandma? And spending your pension money? Please don't touch that, Martha protested weakly, reaching for her bag. Snake grabbed her wrist, not roughly yet, but firmly enough to stop her. We're just being friendly, Snake said with his permanent sneer. Aren't we being friendly, Beast? The 3 younger bikers by the exit were laughing now, enjoying the show. One of them pulled out his phone to record what they thought would be some harmless entertainment at an old lady's expense. James was halfway to the table when Beast dumped Martha's shopping bag onto the floor. Her new shoes and a few other small purchases scattered across the tiles. Martha's eyes welled up with tears, but she tried to maintain her dignity. Please, she said quietly, my son is a soldier. You won't like this. Beast roared with laughter. A soldier? Where is this bad soldier boy? Off fighting somewhere while Mommy shops alone. He's right here, James said, his voice cutting through their laughter like a steel blade through paper. The bikers turned to find James standing just a few feet away. His stance was relaxed but balanced, his hands open at his sides. To an untrained eye, he might have looked unprepared, but anyone with fighting experience would recognize the practiced stillness of a trained combatant. Well, Beast stood up, towering over James by several inches. Looks like Junior came to protect Mommy. We're just having a friendly chat, weren't we, Grandma? Snake's grip on Martha's wrist tightened slightly, making her wince. James noticed the small gesture and felt a familiar calm settle over him, the same feeling he'd experienced in combat situations when there was no more room for uncertainty. Let go of my mother's wrist, James said quietly. Pick up her things, apologize, and leave. Beast stepped closer, using his size to loom over James. Or what, soldier boy? This ain't the army. There's 5 of us and 1 of you. The 3 younger bikers moved closer, forming a loose circle around James and the table. The few remaining customers in the food court were now all recording with their phones, expecting to witness just another case of bullies harassing people at the mall. None of them realized they were about to see why it was a terrible mistake to mess with a combat veteran army ranger, especially one protecting his mother. Time seemed to slow down in the food court as James Cooper took one controlled breath. His military training had taught him that the next few seconds would be crucial. The 5 bikers had created a hostile circle around him and his mother. Their overconfident positioning told him they weren't trained fighters. Last chance, James said calmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed in life or death situations. Let go of my mother. Snake tightened his grip on Martha's wrist instead, making her gasp in pain. Or what, tough guy? The youngest biker, the one with the fresh Haiti tattoo on his knuckles, suddenly noticed something that made him pause. Under James's jacket, partially visible now that he had shifted his stance, was a familiar tattoo on his forearm, the United States Army Ranger tab. Ah, Beast, the young biker said nervously, maybe we should. Shut up, rookie, Beast barked, cutting him off. He turned back to James with a mocking smile. Your mom's jewelry would look real nice in our clubhouse. What do you think, boys? James noticed how the mall's security cameras were all pointed their way now. Good. Everything would be recorded. He also saw that the remaining customers had backed away to a safe distance, still recording with their phones. No civilians in the immediate danger zone. I've had buddies die face down in the mud, so people like you could have the freedom to be idiots, James said, his voice still eerily calm. But that freedom ends when you put your hands on my mother. Beast laughed and shoved Martha's chair, making her stumble. James caught her with one hand while simultaneously using his other arm to block Snake's incoming punch. The biker had foolishly telegraphed his move by tensing his shoulder first. Mom, James said gently, helping Martha regain her balance. I want you to walk calmly toward the coffee shop. Now, please. Martha nodded, tears in her eyes, and began moving away from the confrontation. Beast tried to grab her arm as she passed, but James's voice stopped him cold. "Touch her again," James said in a tone that made even Snake take a step back, "and you'll be drinking through a straw for the next 6 months." The youngest biker was now actively backing away. "Beast, man, look at his stance. I think he's one of those special forces guys." I said, "Shut up." Beast roared, his face reddening. "There's 5 of us and 1 of him. I don't care if he's freaking Rambo." James kept his breathing steady, analyzing each opponent. Beast, strong but slow, relies on intimidation. Snake, quicker, but that scar suggests he loses fights. The 3 younger ones, inexperienced, more likely to run than fight. "You got about 3 seconds to walk away," James warned them. After that, I stopped being polite. Snake pulled out a small pocket knife, flicking it open with practiced ease. Pretty big talk for a guy about to get ventilated. The food court had fallen completely silent. Even the mall's background music seemed to have stopped. Everyone was watching, phones recording, as the scene unfolded. 2 seconds, James continued, as if the knife wasn't even worth noticing. His eyes, however, had already marked every potential weapon within reach. Food tray, metal chair, condiment stand. "Get him!" Beast suddenly yelled, throwing a massive but poorly aimed punch at James's head. Time seemed to crystallize into perfect clarity for James Cooper. In Afghanistan, he'd led teams through ambushes and firefights. He'd trained foreign soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. He'd survived situations that would have broken most men. And now, these untrained thugs thought they could take him. As Beast's fist swung through empty air where James's head had been just a split second before, the former Army Ranger allowed himself a small, grim smile. These bikers were about to learn a very painful lesson about judging books by their covers, and about the serious mistake of threatening a combat veteran's mother. Beast's wild punch missed James completely, the big biker's fist whistling through empty air. In the same fluid motion, James stepped to the side and used Beast's own momentum to guide him face first into a metal support pole. The sound of the impact echoed through the food court, followed by gasps from the onlookers. "That's a Ranger." The youngest biker, now backing away quickly, finally managed to make himself heard. "Look at his tattoo, he's a freaking Army Ranger." Snake's eyes widened as he finally noticed the distinctive Ranger tab tattoo on James's forearm. His knife hand trembled slightly as 15 years of military combat experience stared him down. "You should have listened to your young friend earlier," James said calmly, positioned between the bikers and the direction his mother had gone. "Rangers lead the way. That's our motto. Would you like me to demonstrate why?" Beast recovered from his collision with the pole, blood trickling from his nose. His eyes were unfocused, but his anger was clear. "I don't care if he's the whole damn army. Nobody makes me bleed." 2 of the younger bikers looked at each other nervously. One whispered to the other, "My cousin told me about these guys. They're like the Army's special forces or something." "Elite infantry," James corrected them, still maintaining his defensive stance. "We specialize in direct action combat missions. Would you like a demonstration?" Snake made the mistake of lunging forward with his knife. James's response was immediate and devastating. He caught Snake's knife hand, twisted it in a way that made the bones in his wrist grind together, and smoothly disarmed him. The knife clattered to the floor, and James kicked it away while maintaining his grip on Snake's wrist. 3 tours in Afghanistan, James continued conversationally, as if he wasn't holding Snake in an agonizing wrist lock. "Specialized in close quarters combat training. Want to know what else they taught us?" To emphasize his point, he applied slightly more pressure. Snake dropped to his knees, face contorted in pain. "Stop, please." The mall's security guard had finally returned, phone in hand. "Police are on their way," he called out from a safe distance. Beast, however, wasn't done. He charged at James like an enraged bull, ignoring his bloody nose. James smoothly sidestepped again, still controlling Snake with one hand while using his free arm to redirect Beast's charge. The massive biker crashed into a table, sending trays and drinks flying. In the Rangers, James explained to the remaining bikers, who were now frozen in place, "We learned to use an opponent's energy against them. We also learned to fight multiple attackers simultaneously. He increased pressure on Snake's wrist just enough to make him whimper. "Would you like me to continue the lesson?" The youngest biker raised his hands in surrender. "We're done, man. We're done. Snake, Beast, let's get out of here." "Nobody moves until the police arrive," James commanded, his voice carrying the authority of countless battlefield orders. Even Beast, struggling to get up from the scattered tables, stopped moving. Martha had returned with the coffee shop manager, tears in her eyes but pride on her face. "That's my son," she told the manager. "He always protected others, even in elementary school." The growing crowd of onlookers had their phones out, recording everything. Some in the crowd shouted, "Thank you for your service." James kept his focus on the threats in front of him. In the distance, police sirens were getting closer. Snake was still on his knees, Beast was half sprawled across broken tables, and the three younger bikers stood with their hands raised. "The Rangers have a saying," James told them quietly. "Today is a good day to die, but it's an even better day to live and learn from your mistakes. Have you learned anything today?" All five bikers nodded vigorously. Even Beast, his nose still bleeding, had lost his aggressive stance. The revelation that they had picked a fight with a highly trained combat veteran had finally sunk in, and with it came the understanding of just how lucky they were that James had shown restraint. The police sirens were very close now, and James Cooper allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the best way to honor your military training was knowing when not to use it to its full lethal potential. The first police car arrived at Pine Valley Mall with lights flashing, followed quickly by two more patrol vehicles. Through the food court's large windows, James Cooper could see officers rushing toward the entrance. He maintained his hold on Snake, keeping the situation under control until help arrived. "Here's what's going to happen." James addressed the bikers, his voice carrying the same authority he'd used to command troops in combat zones. "When the police enter, everyone stays perfectly still. Any sudden movements, and I'll be forced to demonstrate more ranger techniques. Are we clear?" Four of the bikers nodded immediately. Beast, still nursing his bloody nose, glared but remained still among the scattered tables and chairs. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, their phones still recording every moment of the incident. Officer Sarah Martinez was the first through the door, her hand on her holstered weapon. She quickly assessed the scene. One man professionally controlling a subject, four other subjects in various states of surrender, and a shocked but orderly crowd of witnesses. "Military?" she asked James, noting his controlled stance and perfect grip technique. "Yes, ma'am." Staff Sergeant James Cooper, U.S. Army Rangers, retired. "These gentlemen were harassing my elderly mother and became physically aggressive when asked to stop." Martinez nodded, recognizing the professionalism in his voice. "We can take it from here, Sergeant." She turned to her fellow officers who had just arrived. "Secure the subjects and get statements from all witnesses." As James released Snake into police custody, his mother approached with a mall security guard who was carrying a USB drive. "We have everything on camera," the guard explained to Officer Martinez. "These men entered the mall, caused a disturbance, and then harassed Mrs. Cooper. Her son only acted in defense of his mother." Beast, finally being handcuffed by another officer, couldn't stay quiet. "That maniac attacked us. Look what he did to my nose." Actually, a teenage girl stepped forward from the crowd, her phone in hand. "I recorded the whole thing. They threatened his mom and pulled a knife. He gave them multiple chances to leave." More witnesses came forward, each with their own video evidence. The youngest biker, seeing the situation was completely lost, decided to come clean. It was all Beast's idea. He'd blurted out. "He was mad about the cops busting our bar last week. Said we needed to show everyone we still owned this mall." He looked at James with newfound respect. "We didn't know he was a ranger. If we'd known." Officer Martinez was checking IDs against the police database. Her eyebrows raised as the results came back. Well, looks like Mr. Beast here has several outstanding warrants. And Mr. Snake too. This is turning into quite a productive morning." Martha Cooper had returned to her son's side, clutching his arm. "Jimmy always knows how to handle difficult situations," she said proudly. "Just like his father." The mall manager arrived, looking both concerned and relieved. "Mr. Cooper, I want to thank you for handling this situation so professionally." These men have been causing problems for months, but nobody could stand up to them. James simply nodded. All I wanted was a peaceful morning shopping with my mother. The police were now collecting statements from witnesses. Cell phone videos were being transferred to police devices, security camera footage was being downloaded, and the bikers were being led away in handcuffs. Sergeant Cooper, Officer Martinez said, returning to him with a notepad. I need your official statement, but I want you to know you did everything by the book. Showed restraint, gave multiple warnings, used appropriate force only when threatened. Textbook self-defense. As James began giving his statement, he could hear snippets of conversation from the crowd. Did you see how fast he moved? Man, those Rangers are no joke. He didn't even have to hurt them badly. That's how a real hero acts. Martha touched her son's arm gently. I'm sorry our shopping trip turned into such a scene, Jimmy. James smiled at his mother. Don't worry about it, Mom. In the Rangers, we had a saying, adapt and overcome. Sometimes that means fighting terrorists in Afghanistan, and sometimes it means protecting your mother in a shopping mall. The food court was slowly returning to normal. Mall employees were righting overturned tables and cleaning up spills. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the scene of what would soon become a local legend. The Day 5 troublemaking bikers learned the hard way not to judge a book by its cover, especially when that book was a highly trained Army Ranger. While officers led the handcuffed bikers toward the mall exit, Beast suddenly twisted free with surprising strength. His massive hands, still bleeding from the earlier confrontation, grabbed at the female officer's holstered weapon. James Cooper's reaction was instant. 15 years of combat experience kicked in before anyone else could move. Gun, he shouted, the same warning he used countless times in combat zones. The crowd scattered in panic as Beast managed to get his fingers on the officer's gun. But before he could fully draw it, James closed the distance in 3 rapid steps. His movements were precise, practiced, and devastatingly effective. Bad choice, James said calmly, using a specialized combat technique he'd learned in advanced Ranger training. His right hand locked Beast's wrist in an iron grip, while his left hand trapped the weapon in the holster. In one fluid motion, he twisted Beast's arm behind his back and drove him face down to the floor. Officer Martinez quickly secured her weapon while other officers rushed to assist. That's another felony charge, she said, catching her breath. Attempting to disarm a police officer. Snake, seeing his leader taken down so efficiently, made one last desperate attempt to prove his toughness. He headbutted the officer holding him and tried to run. James, still controlling Beast with one hand, used his free hand to grab a plastic food tray from a nearby table. Taking the coward's way out, Snake? James called out. With perfect precision, he sent the tray flying like a frisbee. It caught Snake in the back of his knees, sending him sprawling. 2 officers quickly pounced on him. The 3 younger bikers, seeing their leaders' failed escape attempts, remained perfectly still, their faces pale with fear and realization. In Afghanistan, James said loudly enough for everyone to hear, we learned to always expect a desperate enemy to make one last stupid move. He increased pressure on Beast's arm just enough to make the big man stop struggling. But usually, they were smart enough to know when they were beaten. Martha Cooper watched from behind the safety of the coffee shop counter, where the manager had pulled her during the chaos. That's my Jimmy, she said proudly to the shocked barista, always staying calm in a crisis. More police officers arrived, responding to the radio call about the attempted weapon grab. They found a scene that looked like something from an action movie. 2 gang leaders pinned down, 3 surrendered bikers, scattered furniture, and a calm military veteran controlling the situation. Staff Sergeant, Officer Martinez said, approaching James once Beast was properly secured. That was some impressive reaction time. Where did you learn that weapon retention technique? James helped the officers get Beast to his feet. Advanced close quarters combat training, ma'am. We had to be prepared for anything in the Rangers. Never thought I'd be using those skills at the local mall, though. The mall's security cameras had caught everything. The guard watching the monitors couldn't believe what he'd seen. Chief needs to see this footage, he said into his radio. This guy just prevented what could have been a serious situation. One of the younger bikers, the one who had recognized James as a ranger earlier, spoke up as officers led him away. Beast always said no one could touch him. Guess he never met a real soldier before. The local news crew had arrived, drawn by police radio chatter about the incident. They found James helping officers collect scattered evidence while giving a detailed statement about the weapon retention technique he'd used. Just another morning at the mall, James said when a reporter tried to interview him. The real heroes are the police officers who deal with this kind of thing every day. Martha finally came out from behind the counter, straightening her clothes and picking up her shopping bags. "Jimmy," she said, trying to sound stern but unable to hide her pride. "When I asked you to take me shopping, I didn't expect quite this much excitement." James smiled at his mother. "Sorry about that, Mom. How about we try that coffee now? I think we've earned it." The mall was slowly returning to normal, though customers couldn't help staring at the scene. Many were already sharing their videos on social media, where the incident would soon go viral. Army Ranger shows mall thugs why you don't mess with America's best. Beast and Snake were led away in reinforced restraints, their tough guy images shattered. The three younger bikers followed, looking more like scared kids than hardened gang members. And in the center of it all stood James Cooper, a quiet professional who had just reminded everyone why the U.S. Army Rangers were considered among the world's elite warriors. By early afternoon, Pine Valley Mall had become the center of local attention. Police cars lined the parking lot, their lights reflecting off the glass entrance doors. Inside, crime scene investigators photographed the food court while detectives interviewed witnesses. The incident had evolved from a simple case of harassment into something much bigger. Detective Mike Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran of the force, sat across from James Cooper in the mall's security office, reviewing the security footage for the third time. On the screen, they watched James' precise movements as he prevented Beast from grabbing Officer Martinez's weapon. "You know, Sergeant Cooper," Rodriguez said, pausing the video, "when we ran the bikers' names through our database, we found something interesting. These guys are connected to at least 12 other assault cases in 3 different counties, but nobody could ever prove it because witnesses were too scared to testify." James sat quietly, his posture still military straight even after the morning's excitement. Martha had been taken home by a female officer, but not before making her son promise to be careful. "Look at this," Rodriguez continued, pointing to another screen showing Beast's criminal record. "Armed robbery, assault, extortion, but he always got away with it. Until today." The detective smiled. "We got 37 witness videos, clear security footage, and an attempted weapon grab from an officer. Beast and his crew won't be causing trouble for a long time." Outside the security office, local news crews had gathered. The story was spreading rapidly. Army Ranger protects mother, stops gang leaders at local mall. Social media was exploding with videos of the incident, each showing different angles of James's skilled takedowns. "Sir," a young officer stuck his head in the door, "the FBI is here. Apparently, they've been building a case against the Street Kings for months. Agent Wilson would like to speak with Sergeant Cooper." James nodded calmly. His Ranger's training had taught him to expect the unexpected, though he hadn't planned on his shopping trip turning into a federal investigation. FBI agent Sarah Wilson entered the room, carrying a thick file. "Sergeant Cooper, your actions today may have just helped us crack a case we've been working on since last year. The Street Kings aren't just local troublemakers. They're part of a larger criminal organization involved in weapons trafficking." She opened the file, showing photos of Beast meeting with known criminals. "When we search their clubhouse with the warrants we're getting, I bet we'll find evidence linking them to several federal crimes. Your mall incident gives us probable cause." The mall manager appeared at the door, looking both worried and grateful. "Sergeant Cooper, there's something you should know. We've been checking our security footage from the past few months. These bikers have been targeting elderly shoppers, especially women wearing expensive jewelry. They'd follow them to their cars, but we could never prove anything." James thought of his mother's gold necklace, his father's anniversary gift to her. They picked the wrong target today. "They sure did?" Rodriguez laughed. "By the way, Officer Martinez wanted me to tell you that the police academy is looking for combat instructors. After seeing your weapon retention technique, they're very interested in your skills." A young detective entered with printed screenshots from social media. The videos of the incident had already gone viral, with millions of views. Comments praised James's professionalism and restraint. "This is how a real hero acts. Watch how he gave them every chance to walk away." That weapon disarm was textbook perfect. Speaking of those videos, Agent Wilson said, "Our training division would love to use them for teaching purposes. The way you handled the situation, maintaining control while using minimal force, it's exactly what we try to teach our agents." James remained modest. "I just did what I was trained to do. The Rangers taught me that true strength isn't about hurting people, it's about protecting others while using appropriate force." Detective Rodriguez closed his notebook. "Well, Sergeant, we'll need you to come down to the station to complete some paperwork, but that can wait until tomorrow. You've had quite a morning." As James stood to leave, the mall security chief approached with an elderly security guard. "Sir," the old guard said, his voice shaking slightly, "I want to apologize for walking away when those bikers first showed up. I was scared. Watching you handle them, it reminded me why I became a security guard in the first place. To protect people." James shook the guard's hand. "Fear is natural. Courage is about doing what's right despite that fear." Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mall parking lot. News vans were still arriving, and social media continued to buzz with the story of how one Army Rangers shopping trip had brought down a criminal organization. But James Cooper was already thinking about tomorrow. He had promised his mother they would finish their shopping, and Rangers always kept their promises. 2 weeks after the mall incident, James Cooper sat in the district courthouse, watching as Beast and his gang faced the judge. The courtroom was packed with spectators, including many elderly mall shoppers who had finally found the courage to come forward about past harassment. Beast, now wearing an orange prison jumpsuit instead of his leather vest, looked much smaller without his gang around him. His nose, still slightly crooked from his encounter with the mall's support pole, twitched nervously as the charges were read. "Your Honor," the district attorney addressed the court. "Following the mall incident, 37 additional victims have come forward. The FBI's investigation of the Street Kings clubhouse revealed stolen property, illegal weapons, and evidence linking them to numerous crimes across 3 states." Snake, seated next to his court-appointed lawyer, couldn't stop staring at the floor. The 3 younger bikers had already accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony against their leaders. Beast's tough guy image had crumbled completely when faced with the mountain of evidence. Martha Cooper sat in the front row beside her son, wearing her gold necklace proudly. Several other elderly women from the mall had joined her, each with their own story about the gang's intimidation tactics. Furthermore, the DA continued, "The attempt to disarm Officer Martinez shows a complete disregard for law enforcement and public safety. The prosecution recommends maximum sentences for both primary defendants." Beast's lawyer stood up, trying to salvage something from the situation. "Your Honor, my client wishes to make a statement." The judge nodded, and Beast slowly rose to his feet. His voice, once so threatening, now sounded tired and defeated. I want to apologize to Mrs. Cooper and all the other people we scared, and to Sergeant Cooper." He turned to face James. "You could have really hurt us that day, but you showed mercy. That's something I never understood before." James maintained his professional composure, but he noticed how Beast's words affected the other victims in the courtroom. Sometimes, seeing a bully admit their wrongs could be more healing than any punishment. The judge, a Vietnam veteran himself, adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Beast, or should I use your real name, Robert Johnson, your reign of terror at Pine Valley Mall and surrounding communities ends today. Thanks to the courage of one Army Ranger and his mother, we finally have the evidence needed to put you away for a very long time." Snake received 15 years for his role in the crimes and the attack on officers. Beast, with his longer record and attempt to grab an officer's weapon, got 25 years. The 3 younger gang members received lighter sentences in exchange for their cooperation. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around James and Martha. The story had gained national attention, highlighting both the problem of community intimidation and the positive impact veterans could have in civilian life. "Sergeant Cooper," one reporter asked, "how does it feel knowing your actions that day led to the breakup of an entire criminal organization?" James answered with characteristic modesty, "I just wanted to protect my mother and other shoppers. The real credit goes to law enforcement and the victims who came forward to testify." Martha beamed with pride beside her son. "Jimmy has always been a protector, even as a little boy. Now everyone knows what I've known all along. He's a true hero." The FBI had already contacted James about consulting on their training programs. The local police academy had offered him a position as a self-defense instructor. Even the mall had asked him to help redesign their security protocols. The best part, Martha told a reporter, is that elderly shoppers don't have to feel afraid anymore. We can wear our jewelry and carry our purses without looking over our shoulders. As they walked down the courthouse steps, James noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was the youngest of the biker's victims, an elderly woman who had lost her wedding ring to the gang months ago. The FBI had recovered it from the clubhouse. "Thank you, Sergeant Cooper," she said, showing him her recovered ring. "Not just for catching them, but for showing us that one person standing up to bullies can make a difference." James smiled, remembering something his commander had once told him in Afghanistan. Sometimes the biggest battles we fight aren't against enemy forces, but against those who prey on the innocent in our own communities. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as James and Martha headed home. The mall incident had started as a simple shopping trip, but had ended up changing their community for the better. And somewhere in Pine Valley Mall, there was still a cup of coffee waiting to be enjoyed by a mother and her son, this time without any interruptions from troublemaking bikers. 1 month after the courthouse sentencing, Pine Valley Mall had transformed into a very different place. On this sunny Saturday morning, James Cooper walked through the main entrance with his mother Martha, noticing all the positive changes their eventful shopping trip had sparked. The mall now had a new security team, personally trained by James himself. The old security guard who had been afraid of the bikers was now the head of a more confident and better prepared unit. They wore professional uniforms and maintained an alert but friendly presence throughout the mall. "Look, Jimmy," Martha said, pointing to a newly installed plaque near the food court. It read, "Dedicated to those who stand up against bullying and protect our community." Below was a smaller line, "Inspired by Staff Sergeant James Cooper, U.S. Army Rangers." James shook his head modestly. "They didn't need to do that, Mom." "Oh, but they did," came a voice behind them. It was Mrs. Anderson, the elderly woman who had recovered her wedding ring after the FBI raid on the Street Kings clubhouse. She was leading a group of senior citizens on what had become a regular weekend mall walk. "We finally feel safe here again." The food court, where the confrontation had taken place, was now bustling with activity. The coffee shop where James and Martha had never gotten their drinks that fateful day had created a new menu item, the Ranger's Brew, a strong coffee with a smooth finish, just like the soldier who inspired it. Sergeant Cooper called out Officer Martinez, who was getting coffee with some police academy cadets. She now used James's mall incident videos as training materials at the academy, where he taught defensive tactics twice a week. "My new trainees have been dying to meet you." The young cadets gathered around, eager to hear from the man whose techniques they'd been studying. One of them spoke up, "Sir, is it true you took down 5 bikers without causing any serious injuries?" James smiled. "The best victories are the ones where everyone walks away having learned something." He looked at the cadets seriously. "Remember, our job is to protect and serve, not to punish." Near the shoe store where it had all started, a new community outreach center had opened. It offered self-defense classes for seniors, taught by veterans who had been inspired by James's story. The program had already enrolled over 100 elderly citizens, helping them feel more confident and secure. Martha showed James a flyer for the center's latest initiative, Veterans and Community Safety Awareness Day. His story had encouraged other veterans to get involved in community protection, creating a network of trained individuals who could help keep the peace. "Your father would be so proud," Martha said softly, touching her gold necklace, the same one that had caught the biker's attention that day. "You not only protected me, you helped protect the whole community." As they walked through the mall, James noticed something else that had changed. The scared looks and hurried steps of elderly shoppers were gone. Instead, senior citizens walked confidently, shopping and socializing without fear. Some even wore their jewelry openly again, no longer worried about being targeted. The local news had dubbed it the Ranger Effect. How one man's courage had inspired a community to stand up against intimidation. Crime rates around the mall had dropped significantly, and other shopping centers were implementing similar security measures. "Mom," James said as they finally reached the coffee shop, "how about that coffee we never got to enjoy?" Martha beamed. "I'd love that, Jimmy. And this time, no interruptions." As they sat down with their drinks, James reflected on how much had changed since that morning when 5 bikers made the mistake of threatening his mother. The Street Kings were finished, their leaders in prison, and their clubhouse now a community center. The mall was safer, the elderly community was more confident, and veterans had found a new way to serve. A group of teens walked past their table, and James overheard one say, "That's him, the ranger from the videos. My dad says he's the reason we can hang out at the mall without worrying about those bikers anymore." Martha reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand. "You know, Jimmy, when I asked you to take me shopping that day, I just wanted to buy new shoes. Instead, you helped change our whole community for the better." James smiled at his mother, taking a sip of his coffee. "Rangers lead the way, Mom. Sometimes that means leading armies in combat, and sometimes it means leading communities toward positive change." As the morning sun streamed through the mall's skylights, James Cooper realized that his greatest victory hadn't been defeating the bikers. It had been showing everyone that one person standing up for what's right could inspire an entire community to become stronger, safer, and braver.